Great. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Fairfield's May meeting for the Board of Finance. Our large item tonight is, and our statutory item tonight is to set the mill rate for the next fiscal year based on the budget process. Would everybody please rise? And I'm going to ask our Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Merritt, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. As I indicated in my opening remarks, the first item on the agenda tonight is to set the mill rate for the fiscal year beginning July 2016 through June 2017. That would be based on the budget approved by the RTM earlier this week. The second item would be to act upon some expense list items for our tax collector who's here this evening. Always a gripping conversation, those suspense items. The third item is the Fairfield Ludlow High School Building Committee is going to talk to us tonight about a resolution regarding the windows replacement. The fourth item is to hear and consider and approve the appointment of auditors for the next fiscal year. The fifth item is related to the transfer of funds from IT contingency to IT capital outlay of about $90,000. And the last item is a review of the minutes from many meetings and approval of those minutes. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns from board members before I start this evening? Mr. Hofkin.
Mr. Chairman, you said that the mill rate is our first item on the agenda.
It is.
The first selectman can't be here right now. He's got a conflict, another meeting in town that he's attending. I think his presence here would be pretty important, his input on how various issues might affect the town. I'd like to ask, or actually move, that we postpone hearing that until later in the meeting when he can be here.
Do you have a specific item? What number would you like to move it to? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'd like to move it to number 6.
To number 6. Do we have a second to that? Okay, anybody have any questions, comments?
I have some questions.
Sure.
Where's the first selectman?
There is a Holocaust commemoration this evening, and he is being asked to speak. He will do his bit there, and he will come here.
What time's he speaking?
Well, that meeting is going on as we speak. I don't know exactly when he's speaking, but I know he did tell me that he thought he could be here very shortly.
By shortly, did he give you an estimated time?
No.
Anybody
But
else?
obviously, if we get to number 6 and he's not here, I mean, we can speak about it again, but I think we can give him the respect of waiting just a little bit, because we do have other items on the agenda we can be taken care of.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd like to hear from him. I agree. I think maybe we should hear from him, but I think we should just hear from him as soon as he arrives, the very next item. As soon as he arrives, the very next item, we
That's fine.
deal with it.
All right, that's fine.
Okay, so all in favor of moving this later in the agenda? We'll say number 6, and then we'll move it forward. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That's what we'll do. Thank you. All right, let's go to the most gripping item of the night. The hear, consider, and act upon the suspense list from the tax collector. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome. Go right ahead.
Okay. It's a statutory requirement every year for the tax office to go through its list and to examine the uncollected taxes and make a list of the taxes that we feel are uncollectible through our office. All of these are accounts that have over the years either had no response at all, or the mail continuously is returned. We have turned some of them over to a collection agency. We still haven't been able to collect them. So the way the statute is that we can deem these as uncollectible, ask the Board of Finance to approve them, and then they get taken off the collectible taxes for the town. Because if you leave them on, it's kind of a false impression that we can collect them, and we've done everything we can, and really there's no reason to keep sending delinquent statements if you know they're going to keep coming back, that type of thing. So we prepare a list, and the list was submitted to you a little earlier this week, I believe. And a lot of them are like bankruptcies or uncollectible businesses that have closed. So once the list is approved, they're taken out of our collectible list. That doesn't mean that if we find them, we can still collect the tax. And we do have a breakdown in our reporting that shows the suspense items that have been collected. So it's not a large percentage, but anything we find, we're happy to take that money. And so all this is really a formality to make our collectible rate, the amount that we can collect, a more realistic number.
Thank you. Do we have questions or comments from board members? Mr. Hopkins?
I want to ask, if you, as you say, you do collection activity, you send letters and you try to collect, if those are not successful, do you follow up with an effort to ever to seize property and take it? Like if somebody has a car that they owe money on, do you ever do something to have somebody, no?
No, we can't possess a car.
Why not? I mean, if,
We can put a boot on it, but I don't think we can sell real estate, but I don't know of anybody that has tried to possess a car. So,
all right. Do you know, is there any provision under state law for a town to be able to do that? I mean, or are we just left to the normal civil means of collecting a debt?
well, I would say I haven't, I can research the statute for you, I'm happy to do that. And I'm sure if it was possible, somebody would have done it. Because motor vehicle is actually the hardest to collect once people leave the state. So a lot of these that are on this list, the cars are not even registered anymore. So it's not like we could even identify them. So most of these are, the ones that are in the newer grand list years usually are due to bankruptcy. If somebody claims bankruptcy and that bankruptcy is discharged and they don't have to pay the tax, there's nothing that we can do about it.
So people can discharge their property tax obligations in bankruptcy?
Only they're unsecured. Motor vehicle is unsecured. But anything that has a lien, such as real estate or sewer use, is a secured tax. So no matter what their bankruptcy outcome is, those taxes still get paid. But motor vehicle taxes can be discharged, and then they don't have to pay those.
Do you have some kind of follow-up as to, because you said a lot of these people have now moved out of state or far away. Do you have some kind of way of knowing that they've moved out of state? Are they registered somewhere else now? Or
We
something
don't
like that?
have that access to that information. However, we do turn it over to a collection agency, and they do skip tracing. And they actually find a lot of people out of state, because that's their entire business. We have a total of about 55,000 motor vehicle bills every year. So we have about a 97% collection rate, but that's still a lot of bills that come back. We do find a tremendous amount of people just through our research, and we mail those bills out. Most of these are all older bills. They're bills that people we couldn't find or we lost contact. They no longer have their cars registered in Connecticut. We do have a direct access to DMV, so we do look for them on DMV, and we look for their addresses and see if they've registered any other cars. We do that as a matter of policy and procedure in our office. But once we put a certain amount of effort into finding them and we still don't find them, then we turn them over for collection in hopes that the collection agency can find them. If they can't find them, then they usually get put on the suspense list.
Isn't there a procedure to put some kind of a lien on a car, though, if you know that it's here?
Not a lien. A lien that's on the property, most municipalities either do a boot or they do towing. They tow the cars with a warrant.
I would question that. I know, and I can't say I'm familiar with the statute, but I have been in other towns where the tax collector has had constables or marshals go out and deliver liens of some kinds on the car. So I'd be interested in
there's-
knowing if there's something akin to that that at least might help with that.
Well, there's an alias tax warrant. Maybe
Okay,
that's what you're thinking of.
that might be what I was thinking.
Yeah. There's an alias tax warrant. And I use those in other towns that I've been the collector for, in a small town. Am I doing it? About me? Thank you.
Do you do that? Do you do the tax warrants?
We do tax warrants on personal property only. We do not do them on motor vehicles, just because of the volume.
Okay. All
Because
right.
we have 47,000 motor vehicle car taxes due in July. At the end of July, we have maybe 7,000 of them that are still delinquent.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hopkins, did you get your car back? No, I'm kidding. Mr. Walsh, you're right ahead.
Cinda, going to what Mr. Hopkins was saying, I thought I read an article in the Connecticut Post that the city of Bridgeport, and I'm not sure whether it was parking tickets or whatever, but there was a big scandal that happened. I'm surprised it's there, but whatever. Where they were selling the cars. The guy who was appointed by City Hall was selling the cars. And I think he had been a state marshal for a while. And he was selling them at an auction to himself, and then selling the cars for personal gain. What was that? Was that for tax sales, or was that for tickets, or what was that for?
No, well, that's, New Haven also had the program where the marshals would have, they hired a company that had a computer system that they scanned the license plates.
Yep.
If they found a car that was delinquent in the town, the marshal had the warrant. An alias tax warrant is a warrant that the tax collector gives to a state marshal or a constable, giving them the power to collect in our behalf. And their process would be to tow the car and put it into a lot to be held. That person doesn't get their car back until they've paid their taxes. And then they have to pay the towing fee and they have to pay the storage fee. A lot of people, cars aren't worth a lot of money and they don't ever redeem them. When you have cities like Bridgeport and New Haven, which have very high mill rates, their taxes can escalate rather quickly. So people abandon their cars. And I believe, and I don't know it for a fact, but my thought process would be that those were cars that were never claimed and that he probably took it upon himself to sell them.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments, concerns on this item? Mrs. Leclerc?
How does this compare to what we put into suspension in prior years?
Last year was a little over 100,000. I think it was like 123 maybe. So we've looked at, we've been very aggressive the last couple of years. And so now, we've gotten to the point where we're getting to a more current grand list years. We had a lot of more delinquencies over the past few years. So we changed software right before when I came here 4 years ago. We changed software, and we also started putting in some different policies and procedures. Those were a little more effective as to helping us decide whether we could find them or whether we couldn't find them. So that's why over the years, the first few years were a little bit higher. These now, we've gotten through a certain amount of backlog, and now we're working with more current grand lists.
Sounds great, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to put this before us? Mr. Brown? Do I have a second? Go with Mr. Mottola. The item is before us, and it's to hear, consider, and act upon the suspense list for the tax collector to allow her to move these accounts in the total of $97,773.97 to uncollectible. All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? That item is done. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's go to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the Fairfield Ludlow High School Building Committee. We have representatives from the building committee here tonight. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. Welcome. Before I turn it over and ask you to introduce yourselves, I do want to comment that members of the Board of Education could not be here tonight because they have a simultaneous meeting going on across town, which is one of the reasons we're in this room. We know where we stand. But Dr. Title is there, as well as the Board of Education taking care of their business this evening, and they don't want their absence to reflect poorly on the discussion of these windows. Thank you. Yes.
I really would like both Dr. Title and First Selectman to be here when we discuss this item, because I will have questions that I would like them to answer.
Okay, so Dr. Title will not be here tonight. We can hear the presentation and then follow up with him. I think the First Selectman should be en route. I'm happy to entertain a motion to move this back so that he can be here. Sorry, gentlemen. And take up other matters beforehand.
It's up to the board. I'm okay with discussing it. I just know I will have questions for them.
Okay, so why don't we start the discussion, and then we can move forward and decide whether we want to vote on it or push it back.
I also think the chair of the Board of Education should be here as well, which I know he's at another meeting, so that's impossible. So I'm questioning how we're going to have a full discussion on this without everyone being here.
Okay, so what's the pleasure of the board? Would you like to postpone this to the next meeting? Sure.
And bond counsel.
Okay,
Is bond counsel here?
we've asked that bond counsel be here anytime we discuss a bonded item.
Numerous times.
You're absolutely right.
And we need them, I think, for this.
Yep.
My opinion.
Apparently, there's a lot of people.
But you're right.
Okay, so, do I have a motion on the floor? Now, in fairness, okay, the issue that they're having as a committee right now is they're asking for bids to be held open, and I don't want to speak for you gentlemen, but you're asking for bids to be held open by contractors awaiting the approval of this item, correct?
That is correct.
And the extension is running out on that, is that correct?
Well, first of all, my name is Mark Donald. I'm the chair of the building committee.
Hello, Mark.
And I'll defer to Mr. Manning on the specifics of that. But currently, the bids are, the contract date has passed, so the contractors are keeping their bids open in good faith.
Okay.
So any extension or delay a contractor could drop out.
I appreciate that. Mr. Mayor, what's the date of our quarterly meeting?
The day of the quarterly meeting is the 19th, which is a Tuesday, and the RTM should be meeting on the 18th. And then they, for their committee meetings, and on the 25th for their voting meeting. So I'm sure they would, not sure of anything. I would think they would allow it to be heard in committee pre you guys hearing it.
Okay. So we can
I
do
mean, we
it
could
on the
work towards
19th.
that anyway.
Okay, so we can do this on the 19th if,
Yeah.
okay. In other words, it wouldn't be a full month. I'm just trying to. Mr. Walsh?
How long have you had these bids? The original date of the bid, when was the date of the bid?
My name is Peter Manning at Gilbane Building Company. We took bids, I want to say January 3rd or January 4th, right after New Year's.
And what are we doing here on May 5th? Being some degree of rush and trying to keep people open, and we're just getting this now. How does it get from early January to May 5th, 5 months before it gets to our table?
So there was a delay of 1 month of being, because we did not have an April meeting. So that's on us.
Okay,
Okay.
that's 1 month.
That's 1 month. Before that, I can't speak to. Okay, but it is fair to say that that 1 month delay was your accommodation to us, right, at my request.
That's correct, and I think You know, if I may, at least, we could give a brief overview of the timeline, et cetera,
Please.
which may answer some of those questions.
Please.
And then, you know, we can defer to whatever the board chooses after that. So just the high level that will hopefully answer some of these questions very quickly is, we went out to bid in early January. The bids were completed in late January, if I have it correct, and we actually had approved a GMP as a committee on January 20th. And then we were wrapping up, so, you know, let me rewind a bit. So we have what, in our jargon, we had 3 phases to complete based on the funding approved in 2013. Phase 1 we refer to as the roof, which obviously is very straightforward. Phase 2 is the classroom and cafeteria additions, and then phase 3 is the window. So we started all 3 processes. As a committee, we were formed in August 2013, and we hired the team in January of 2014. So essentially, all 3 phases were begun at the same time, and we actually at the same time we hired the team, we hired the environmental consultant to begin the EPA process, or excuse me, the PCB process, which obviously had to go through EPA, which is a lengthy process. So phases 1 and 2, which again are the roof and the classroom and the cafeteria additions, were completed in August 2015, which was the biggest driver of the whole project, was to make sure that the classroom and cafeteria was complete in time for the new high school schedule. And then phase 3, we continued to go back and forth with EPA, and we finally received approval in December?
December 10th.
In December to go, and that's when the bidding process. So that's part of the reason with the disconnect with the timing and completion of the 3 phases. Phases 1 and 2 are...
Okay, but what about between January through April?
Right, so the
And
GMP...
I'm taking a hit for May.
Yeah, so January 20th, again, the GMP, and in conversations with the selectmen, he wanted to have a little more finality as we were closing out the bids from phases 1 and 2 to get the final cost of that, as well as some other projects unrelated to this and out of our control jumped ahead in the queue. I may be incorrect, but I know the Holland Hill project is one that has some urgency. And so that back and forth is what pushed it back through the month of February and March.
Okay, so it was the first selectman who pushed it back.
Yeah, he wanted us to give him more, I guess, fidelity of our phases 1 and 2 numbers, yes.
Fidelity of the numbers, when you use the word fidelity.
Finality, that's the word. Yeah.
Finality of the
It's
numbers.
the wrong F word, my
Okay.
apologies.
Okay. So finality of phases 1 and 2.
Yes.
What does he mean by that?
So, well, Peter, do you want to speak to this?
So we basically prepared a GMP, guaranteed maximum price, for phases 1 and 2, hired all the contractors to complete those. At the end of the process, we wanted to make sure all change orders were closed out, all funds were paid. Basically, we were sure of the bottom line of the cost for phase 1 and 2. And I think that's what the first selectman was looking for, to make sure that there was a clear-cut delineation of how much phases 1 and 2 cost before they moved forward with 3.
And how long did that take?
It took till about April 6th when we made the presentation to the selectmen. So the work was complete at September, October, and it took a number of months to close out the project.
So the project, the first 2 phases were completed in August 2015, and it took that long to get it all closed down?
There was still some miscellaneous work that went on after the occupancy, but yes, it was somewhere in February or March, that the timeframe was, the projects were closed out.
I think we're going to have to adjourn this to the night of the quarterly review.
Yeah.
Because I think there's already things being said here that we need the first selectman for, that I'm going to want to see the chairman of the Board of Education for, that we need bond counsel for.
I agree with bond counsel. The first selectman's going to be here. I did not know of the conflict with the Board of Education until today in a conversation I had with Dr. Tidal, quite frankly. Right. So, I think that's, my apologies, but I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Mr. Flynn, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If we're not meeting until May 19th,
Mhm.
and the RTM has their meeting on May 18th, as I understand,
That's our subcommittee meetings.
that's their subcommittee meetings?
That is
So they'll meet
not
the
their-
following Monday?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure. Which is why I suggested the quarterly as opposed to, I want to be cognizant of the fact that they have been patient. They did get the approval from the Board of Selectmen. We did postpone this because of all that was going on with the budget and everything else that was going on, and we wanted some clarity about that before we brought this to the table. That was my call
Okay.
on that. Does anybody have anything to say? And I'll let the gentleman talk. Is that overly problematic for you if we do that on the 19th?
No, I'm just wondering if it's,
Wait, Mr. Mayor, please.
if it's worthwhile for us to go through the presentation just to give you the overview, and then the action can wait, or we can go to
You know,
more questions.
you have been very patient for us. I would like to just let him walk through the thing, and then we can come back and you can do, I think that's,
Yeah, but
I owe you that.
Okay, and that's fine, but you might be doing the whole thing again, just so you know, because if I start hearing, personally, if I start hearing some things that I think the chairman of the Board of Education needs to hear, bond counsel needs to hear, or the first selectman needs to hear, where I'm going to be asking questions to all of you again, we're going to have to step through it all over again.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'm just trying to be
And
honest about
in
it.
that, and Mr. Walsh, I think that's very fair. In that, let's try to keep our questions itself tonight to the minimum in deference to it. Let's walk through the presentation, write down our notes, then when everybody's here, we can ask questions together. Mr. Mayor, you had a comment you wanted to...
Yeah, with apologies, it doesn't change anything other than if everybody shows up for a meeting on the 19th. That's actually Thursday. The meeting is actually the 17th,
17th.
Tuesday.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry.
Tuesday, the 17th.
Tuesday, the 17th is me. So in other words, you gave me the wrong date a couple of minutes ago. That's-
Yes.
Okay.
yes. But everything else still works the same.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you to walk us through the presentation briefly, and thank you.
Okay, so I'll kick it off. Again, my name is Peter Manning, Gilbane Building Company. We are the construction manager for the Ludlow project. I had hoped to project this PowerPoint, but with no screen. If you'll bear with me, we'll just go through the handout. On page 2, the purpose of our presentation is really to provide you with a brief summary of the Ludlow project status, the costs incurred to date, and ultimately we're seeking to get approval from the Board of Finance to move forward with Phase 3. On page 3, just a quick summary of the project. The project at its initiation was really cut into 3 phases. Phase 1 was the roof replacement project at the Ludlow High School, and that included about 80% replacement of the roofs. There were some portions of the roof that were relatively new and still under warranty, so those roofs were not replaced. Phase 2 was the classroom and cafeteria additions. The cafeteria addition was required to accommodate student population growth and revised classroom schedule, renovate the existing cafeteria in conjunction with the addition, and academic addition to accommodate 4 classrooms and 4 labs. And those 2 additions were separate from each other. One is in the back of the Ludlow School, the cafeteria, and the classroom addition is a 3-story addition on the front wing. The third phase was the window replacement project, and the identification of PCBs and asbestos in the caulking in the existing windows required that the program get submitted to EPA for approval. And the Phase 3 was really to establish an abatement plan to remediate and replace those windows with more energy efficient windows in the building. Moving on to page 4, just a little bit of background information. Approved funding was based on an estimate that was prepared by Silver Petroselli Architects back in January of 2013, and the approval of the $11,630,700 was approved by the town in May of 2013. And then the design for the Ludlow project commenced with a different architect, and it should be noted that Perkins Eastman was the selected architect in early 2014. Page 5, a little bit of budget history. Based on development of the design of Phase 1 and 2 and the at the design development phase of the design, which is prior to bidding, it was identified by the project team that all 3 phases could not be funded for the amount that was approved in 2013. In June of 2014, the school superintendent expressed urgency to complete at least the academic wing and the cafeteria addition to meet the demands of additional enrollment and scheduling changes that the school was undergoing. So in June 19th of 2014, Mark, the chair of the building committee, the town director of purchasing, Fairfield Public Schools, and the first selectman discussed a strategy to deal with the Phase 3 partially with what money was available on the original budget and complete Phase 1 and 2 complete. In November of 2014, the Board of Education amended the ed spec and really did 2 things. One, it allowed a single layer roof membrane on the roofs, which was an effort to save some money on Phase 1, and then also amended the ed spec to proceed with Phase 1 and 2 and complete what parts of Phase 3 could be afforded under the original funding request. Go to page 6. This gives a brief schedule summary of where we were with regard to bidding. Phase 1, the roof replacement was approved by the state in June of 2014, was bid once originally in right after June, was over budget significantly.
I think you just need to hit the highlights. I don't
Okay.
think you need to read
Okay.
every line on. Okay, go right ahead, please.
Bottom line is Phase 1 and 2 are complete, and occupancy is complete, and they're occupying. Based on EPA issues on Phase 3, we were not allowed to bid Phase 3 until December, at which time we put the package out to bid. The page 7 is basically a summary of the costs of the Phase 1 and 2. It is total construction cost was $9.7 million, adding all of the architect, owner consultants, professional fees, FF&E, and some of the costs of Phase 3, and I think that's important. some of the design costs for Phase 3 are included in this cost. The total amount expended or projected at this point in time, and this number's actually come down a little bit, was $11,371,862, which means there is a balance of $258,000 left in the original budget. The next page is the costs, basically a more detail of those numbers I just gave you. We won't go into that. Page 9 gives some procurement and construction status of Phase 3. And I think if you just go right to page 11, the funding request summary shows that we're requesting 3.907,674 in order to fund the Windows Complete. Now, the difference between Phase 1 and 2 is that the original funding was not based on bid numbers. Phase 3, this value is based on bid numbers. So in as much as the contractors will hold their numbers, we are relatively confident this number will stand firm. We have included some higher levels of contingency in the event a contractor decides not to honor their bid and would, potentially walk away. So with the available $258,000, the grand total being requested is 3.907 to complete the Ludlow windows.
So the Ludlow windows, this was originally about a $11.6 million project.
Correct.
Approved. The Ludlow windows themselves, if I factor in the 4.167, which you're saying is the cost including the 258, plus the 300,000 that was spent, that comes to close to $4.5 million in total to do Phase 3. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Phase 1 and 2, using that same math, cost $11 million in total.
11 million less the 303 that was spent in the.
I subtracted that
yes.
out.
Yeah. So yes, you're right.
So it's 11,371 less the 3.
Correct.
303. So it's about 11,000,001.
Correct.
Okay. Brief comments, questions from board members, and then I do want to make sure I don't. To Mr. Walsh's point, I don't want to redo this again. But does anybody have anything looking at the presentation that they know they're going to want to talk about to be better prepared in a couple weeks?
After voting, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
I'm going to want to talk about this whole project. I mean, I could be here for an hour asking questions. So I think I'm going to try and get some of those answered between now and the next meeting. Just for example, I don't know where the phases came from. I felt like I voted on a project. There were parts to the project, 3 parts to a project, but not 3 phases. We were going to allocate money toward a phase, and then if we ran out, well, then we have to come back to reallocate money to that 3rd phase. I looked at it as one project. So I have about 5 questions from there that I'll wait on. That's just the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Walsh.
I have similar recollection. I don't remember when we were getting this presentation that there was any phasing of this project or any priority of this project in the different phases that were presented. I am going to go back to look at the presentation again to see whether that was actually referenced. My recollection, though, is off the top of my head, this started off as a window and roof project. That's what it was, a window and roof project. And then the whole classroom stuff came in later on. And people making requests on why we needed it. And now all this money is spent, and we don't have one of the main reasons why we did the project. We don't have the windows. So, I'm going to have to go back and look at this. I'm going to see if Fair TV still has this, if it has it online, to be able to review it, I guess, before the next meeting. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would like, at least for myself, if anybody would like to join me, I would like to have a tour of the building to see the work that was done, because I want to compare it against the plans that we originally were presented and I'm trying to figure out where did this go wrong? Because this has got to be one of the biggest cost overruns of any public project that I've seen, other than, I guess, the Metro Center was over, but that was because of environmental reasons that we found out later on. So,
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Can we arrange that for a tour of the building before the next meeting?
and if we can also get, I would like to get, if I think the whole body would like to get, all the materials from the original presentation. Plans, whatever was presented when we first voted on this, if we can have that all again.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. We'll go to Mr. Mottola.
And
I just want to
And then, oh,
I just want to add one attachment to what Jim just asked. The RTM specifically added the budget and attached it to the bond resolution. So I would like that original bond resolution and the attachment.
Mr. Mayor, you're taking all this down, right? Thank you. Mr. Mr. Mottola.
yeah, I don't remember if I was on the Board of Ed still or in the RTM when this whole thing started. It was originally going to be a window replacement project, but there were issues with it. To the extent that we can do it, I'd like a historical time frame with respect to what's happened over the last couple of 3 or 4 years. It's been a while.
Well, to your point,
I just don't remember.
the discussion of the windows for Ludlow
time ago.
goes back about 10 years. I remember doing a tour of the school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
When we did the tour of the school with the headmistress Mrs. Larson, my daughter was about to start high school and she's graduating college. Just for
And I also just, I think it's, to be fair to everybody, I think originally it was a window project, and then the town and the Board of Ed had some other needs, and it developed into something more than a window project, so,
You're exactly right.
so it's,
Well, we had the window project, then they knew that the roof was starting to fail.
Right.
They had the problem with the roof,
right,
and then they decided that they had the capacity problem.
right.
So you're exactly right. It morphed over a period of years.
Right, and we're not being critical of you guys. Thank you for all your hard work. Just, I just don't remember. Maybe I'm getting old. So I'd like to see that.
I think what this goes to is a process question, because we did a number of years ago, and I think it's absolutely correct to ask for some of that information, approve something for $11 million. And we thought we were getting 3 items. We ended up getting 2 items for the same 11 million, and then coming back for a request to say, what did we really buy? So I think it's appropriate to go back and say, where did this happen? What happened here? How's this different? Mrs. Leclerc, to your comments, how's this different from what we thought we were buying? I think that's all very relevant.
No. It's a history of this would be beneficial also, so we can learn something from it for future projects.
Absolutely.
And that's really why I need bond counsel here. I have some questions on what Mr. Flynn just said about the whole process. And again, nothing to do with the building committee, just the process in general. But we could tie it specifically to this project.
Great. All right, so do I have a motion? Mr. Walsh?
Make a motion to adjourn this matter until our quarterly meeting, the night of our quarterly meeting. I also specifically make a request that on that evening, bond counsel be present, the first selectman be present, the chairman of the Board of Education be present, obviously you two gentlemen be present, and a Dr. Title be present.
That would be May 17th, if I can just add to that.
And if they're not available, I think we're going to have to consider moving it again.
Do we have a second to that motion? I'll take Mrs. Leclerc on this. Okay, any discussion, question, comments, concerns, gentlemen? All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, that item's moved. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the time. My apologies for the inconvenience because the others could not be here this evening. All right, I'm going to entertain a motion now to move the mill rate discussion up. We had moved it to item number 6. We make a motion to move this to item number 3 right now. Mr. Matola? Do we have a second? Mr. Brown? All in favor of moving this up in the agenda? Opposed? Abstentions? We're moving it up. So before us now is to consider and set the mill rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2016, and ending June 30th, 2017. Annually, Mr. Mayor puts together schedules for our discussion of the mill rate. He's done that again now. I would ask that he walk us through those schedules, and we can move from there. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you go to the third page of the handout, Schedule A, we have the approved RTM expenditure budget of $293 million. Estimated fees, services, and other $14 million. This is the budget that was passed by the Board of Finance. It has two somewhat minor changes. We have updated information on the BAA adjustments, and we have there's been a change in the collection rate, improvement in the correction, an increase in the collection rate. But so the state revenue of $9,299,000 assumes the revenue that was anticipated at the time that this board passed the original budget. Prior year tax, interest, liens, and fees, etc. So it comes down to a net current year revenue required from taxes of $267 million. And we have the credits, reserves. I think we all know what most of those are. The reserve fund collected there is at 98.71. The budget that you passed was at 98.61. So that's been increased by 10 basis points, which has an impact of about $270,000. And we have the mill rate. The original mill rate was 25.45. The mill rate with those two changes, 25.43.
So, Mr. Mayor, going on to the next page, the mill rate the night we set the budget, we believe the mill rate to be the 2545. Is that a correct?
That is a correct statement, sir.
Okay. I just want to give clarity. Okay.
No, I appreciate that.
And the mill rate, based on better available information related to the collection rate and the change in the basis, the mill rate would actually come down to .2543 versus .2545.
Correct.
What's the differential in those numbers, dollar-wise?
$212,000.
Okay. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
And you go to schedules. Okay, so this Schedule B is just a ton of numbers that we just went over the overview of, which I don't think we go into detail. I think you just hit the highlights. You go to Schedule C, which has in the box at the top of the page the mill rate of 25.43 or .02543, whichever I'm looking at. That's a mill rate change from the prior year of 2.58%. That's what the reserve fund collected, as I mentioned, is at $3.5 million approximately, and it collected as a percent of 98.71. Impact on the median homeowner of $223. If you look below, you see the collection rate history. Note that prior to a couple of years ago, the town included overpayments in the collection rate, so the numbers weren't accurate, but the numbers are accurate starting in fiscal year 14. That's why I haven't gone back further. And you can see that the actual in 14 was 98.72. The actual in 15 is 98.61. The budgeted, that was for 15. The budgeted for 16 was 98.71. And as of my latest evaluation of numbers, 98.77. is my forecast for this full year.
Any questions, Mr. Mayor? Seeing none, continue, please.
Next page is D, basically shows the, it just kind of repeats, you see on the first column, got the assessed value, the A, $497,000 is the medium home, $674,000 is appraised value is the average home. Then you have the assessed value, the mill rate. Why is the mill rate 2479 instead of 2483? Oh, excuse me. I was,
That's this year.
Yeah, that's right. Going to this year. And you got the tax, thank you. I got a little confused there. Looking at numbers that I think should be different. So you got the 274, the 2543, got the new tax levy for the homes of these appraised values, and then it shows the tax levy increase, as I mentioned earlier, the $223,000 on the medium home, it's $223 on the medium, $302 on the average home. To flip the page to Schedule E, you see that there's 4 items in the budget that everything else appears pretty solid to the best of our knowledge and given the information that we have at this date. The latest state budget has us losing $2,298,000. We've discussed the motor vehicle adjustment number, and as we have 2,009, we have 48,000 vehicles on our grand list. 2,093 of those vehicles have addresses, owners and garage both not being Fairfield addresses. The total grand list amount and the tax adjustment amount, if none of them are ours, would be $417,000. Other towns have the same problem. When they fix this problem, I'm anticipating that all the 417 will disappear, but that we will get an offsetting amount with transfers in from other towns. But I have no way. I've talked with the motor vehicle department. I've talked with the president of the Assessors Association. But there's just nobody. I've talked with the software developers, the people who wrote the programs, see if we could accelerate this information. And they keep, I'm hoping to have it this month, but who knows?
So essentially, the 417 is worst case scenario, we lose
Total
all
up
these amounts.
And get nothing.
And get nothing back, which we know is not going to happen. because
Correct.
Other areas are having the same.
Totally correct.
Okay. And these, okay, go right ahead, sorry.
Okay, then we have the assessment appeals. There's $130,000 in the budget for adjustment for court assessment results for the year. Looking at the number of cases that were filed, denied, and approved through the the assessment appeals, it's not bureau, what is it? The BAA, board assessment appeals. And currently people have until May 30th to file to the courts. The filings to date total $56 million of assessed value. If you assume that 10% adjustment, which would be high, I'm just picking a number, that would be about $142,000. But you have a maximum number of 100 cases that you're going to go through in a year. So I'm not anticipating, but I think $200,000 is a better number than the $130,000, just based upon the activity here to date. The senior tax relief was originally budgeted based upon the fiscal year 2016 budget. This has been adjusted to the 2016 actual, which shows an improvement of $334,000. So with respect to numbers 2, 3, and 4, at worst, I figured they would balance each other out. So what I've provided in the next schedule is a reconciliation of the approved budget. It's column B, 8,000,002. The General Assembly budget as of yesterday, 5,000,009. That's the 2,298,000. And then the next page has, that would, if the board were to adjust that revenue in the budget, the mill rate would go from the 25.43 to 25.64. For mill rate change, it would go from the 2.58 to 3.43. Have a collected taxes, tax rate, collection rate of 98.73. It's because of the way that falls out in the grid. So the medium impact on the homeowners is the medium homeowner is $293 versus the current is $223, or a difference of $73 per home.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Questions, comments? Anyone? Mr. Tetra, do you have anything you'd like to say? I know we held on this item for you to come, so.
One, thank you for holding on this, and I do apologize to the board. The Holocaust commemoration ceremony was tonight. That's a very important community event honoring, or remembering, in fact, the 6 million Jews that died in the Holocaust and countless others, various deals under the Nazi Germany regime. And this is an annual event that we hold at this, so I apologize for being late for that. Normally, it doesn't conflict with board meetings of this board, so.
You were where you needed to be. No reason to apologize for that.
Thank you.
So go ahead.
I think as we look at this, and I know there's been a lot of talk about this, but I think that it makes sense to look at a few things. The Board of Finance, as you well know, has a responsibility for a balanced budget and for fully funding the appropriation. I think the circumstance we're in this year is a little bit unique, both because of what's taking place at the state level, but also because of the statement that the RTM made just Monday night, in terms of, in fairly short order, the RTM approved the entire appropriation that was approved by this board unanimously, and that's not something that happens very often these days, but also enthusiastically stating their support that that is the money that this town needs, and that's the money that should be funded to run this town. As you're setting the mill rate, you have an opportunity to honor that request and still keep our overall tax increase to one of the lowest in the past 20 years. I think that we've worked hard, and the department heads have worked hard, to put together a budget that really allows for that adjustment. And given the work they did and given what the RTM asked, to not fund that would be, in effect, cutting the budget, not honoring what the RTM came together and asked us to do. The state aid is currently proposed at a cut of $2.3 million, and that's in the agreed-upon final version of the budget. There's obviously some more presentations that have to be made on that, and a vote on that will take place in the near future. So I would ask that you consider either using the latest available information and looking at that 2.3 million. If you're concerned about that, then I think the wisest course of action might be to consider postponing your vote on the mill rate till we have that information, so that you can make a fully informed decision at that point. I think that's in keeping with what this board has asked for in the past, in terms of having all the information before you make a decision. I think that it will most likely be a couple weeks before we have all that, so that fits in keeping with what you're doing and shouldn't impact the tax bills or the generation at that point. So I'd ask you, as you go through your deliberations, to consider either using the latest available information and accommodating that 2.3 million adjustment, or postponing this so that you have all that information.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. I'm going to go to Mr. Walsh and then to Mr. Matola.
Mr. Tetra, are you asking us to raise taxes? Is that what you're asking this board to do?
I'm asking you to honor what the RTM said.
At the
There
RTM?
is no tax rate or tax until you vote tonight, or vote whenever you vote.
But compared to what we had voted on, our board, and what the mill rate would have been, you're asking us to raise taxes. You're asking us to, and it's still a very big potential, since we don't know what the legislature is going to do. We don't know when they're going to vote on it. We don't know where this is going at all. You're asking us to raise taxes to cover this potential.
I'm asking you to consider making a relatively small adjustment that still keeps the tax increase to the lowest it's been in 20 years.
The tax increase?
Yes.
The tax increase, this 2.6% increase?
No, I believe that includes the adjustment on the grand list also that you
I know, but that's what the real effect is to the taxpayer, isn't it?
Actually, when you look at it, a number of taxpayers will actually pay less this year.
Many will be paying more than that, too.
It's about 50-50.
Yeah, so even half the people are going to pay more than this 2.6%.
There's no question a revalue, it's hard to pick out just the tax increase, but that's why I looked at the budget increase as the best indicator of that.
Yeah, I mean, 2.6% is a lot, 50-50 balance. That's a bit right in the middle. Half the people paying more, yes, some people paying less, but it's still a lot to ask, I believe. And I think it's a lot to ask in this economy that we're asking our taxpayers to pay 2.6% higher on average. And I don't think that's the lowest. That number's the lowest.
No, that number is not.
No, it's not. So I don't think it's even close to being the lowest. And revals happen every 5 years, is it?
Thereabouts.
So it happens when it happens. I mean, we have to deal with it. But that's the effect on the taxpayer. And
Correction there, that's, the tax increase is really the budget increase. It's not the mill rate change. To take an exaggerated example, if as a result of reval, everybody's home was reduced, or was cut in value by 50% or increased by 50%, the mill rate would change, but the taxes paid would not change. The actual tax rate increase is more aligned with the budget increase, not the mill rate change. I think in that tax increase, or in the mill rate change, I think it's 1.7 or 1.8% is from the
I understand the
from the
point.
valuation.
I understand the
1.9.
Yeah, I understand the point, Mr. Mayor. It's valid.
Yeah, I'm just,
But the reality is, to the person getting their tax bill, the individual, they're going to think, if they just listen to us tonight, that they're going to get a tax increase of minimal percent, right? Under 1%, based on the spending increase of under 1%.
correct.
Right? But a lot of our residents are going to open their tax bills, and their tax increase is going to be triple that amount because of the change in their valuation.
I don't know if a lot would be a...
You said 50%. You said
Right.
50%, that's a lot. 50% is a lot.
Well, you said triple.
Well, because they think they're going to get 1%, they're actually going to get 2.6, 2.7%.
Right, but I don't know if that's...
That's a change in the mill rate,
Close
not a
trip.
change in the taxes, though. It's a change in the
But
mill
their
rate.
amount's going to go up. By what percentage?
Not
is
if
their
you're,
tax?
the average house, the average home, the taxes of the average home will go up 0.68%.
Right, but to the extent, there's going to be some taxpayers,
That will go up more, and some will go up less.
2.5%, 3%, and some are going to go down.
Yes.
Right. That's the point. I understand what you're saying, but we're still going to get the phone calls from the people that say, my taxes went up 3%, 5%, right? And we're going to have to go through that entire explanation that you just laid out, right?
Right.
Which they're not going to care about, but, I mean, right, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, you're in the case that literally each of the boards is, except perhaps the RTM in going through this. Certainly your board, the Board of Selectmen,
Right.
and myself, when I'm putting together the budget, you're weighing off that against what the cuts in services would be.
I get it.
By making that change, you assure that the Board of Ed doesn't get cut and the town services don't get cut.
I'm just applying it to context.
Yep.
I understand.
We spent a lot of time building a solid financial foundation so we could have this discussion.
Yep. Mr. Matola?
Okay, so if I'm understanding this budget is, and I guess Mr. Mayor can answer the question, this budget is built on the assumption that we're going to get our full funding from the state of Connecticut. Is that a fair statement? That what the RTM passed?
Right, that's what I said, correct. So
Okay, and, anyone sitting and paying attention over the last 3 weeks to the month knows that that's certainly not going to happen. And, I'm going to have great difficulty voting on this tonight before I know what we're going to get from the state of Connecticut, and we should have that information for next week. So I'm at some point tonight, I'm going to make a motion to postpone this. I think it's clear to me, under state law and state statute, that the RTM appropriated by its vote the spending package, and that we have a legal obligation to fund it fully under state statute, regardless of what we get from the state of Connecticut. That's what the RTM did. So I think we're going to have to do that. And I have a genuine concern that we'd be violating the law if, in fact, we don't do that. And secondly, if we don't fully fund it, we're going to have a big hole in our budget, which essentially, to me, is a cut to the Board of Education budget, and it's a cut to the town budget. And that is very concerning to me. My understanding right now is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mayor, that it's about $2.3 million, based on what we know today, a $2.3 million cut to Fairfield, give or take.
yeah, that's the Schedule E1 in the document.
And I understand that that could change. And my understanding of our legal obligation is that we need to vote based on the most reasonable information that we have. And it certainly is unreasonable to vote on this tonight with an assumption that we're going to get our full funding from the state of Connecticut of $9 million plus. We know we're not going to get that. So what is the, if we wanted to fund the $2.3 million, let's assume that's the number, and I know that could change. And I'm as frustrated as anybody about this. Don't get me wrong, because this has been going on for a while. But if we wanted to fund that $2.3 million, can someone tell me what that would cost? What would the average cost be to the?
I think that's what he did in the last pages.
Yeah, where
John.
is that again? Can you just
That's in the very last 2 pages.
So what is that again?
It'd have to go up to 25.64, correct, Mr. Mayor?
That is correct.
Should go up to on the median, you'd go up $296.
No, it would go up 296.
Did I say that the wrong
Yeah,
way?
the difference is 296 minus 223.
Correct, I wasn't trying to, right, it's like a $75 difference,
$73.
$73 difference
So it's $73 difference.
per average house.
Right, and I understand that. So, I mean, the way I look at it, and I understand these are hard issues, it's $73 for the average taxpayer, and we would be fully funding this budget that I think we're legally obligated to fund based on state law. I have a real concern about going forward on this tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Matola. Mr. Becker?
A few things. So if we were to do that, it's $73 that's then kicked in, that is there forever, right? So next year we increase it, but we increase it based upon the new base that has that.
So I always love when people, break the budget down and say this only costs $10, let's go for it, and all those metrics. But once it's in the budgets don't go down, they always go up.
So the
it's
exception of the town budget this year.
You meant overall the budget, but go ahead.
The overall taxes, it'd be hard pressed to find, even in the 20-year lowest, to find a situation where taxes went down, where people actually saw that, everybody in town, because of the mill rate adjustment.
Sorry, didn't mean to
So-
interrupt, just wanted to clarify that one point.
Sure. And I give you credit, and I think the boards for the work that was done on the town side of the budget, and that brings me to the next point. Within the Board of Education budget and the town budget, however, even with the reduction on the town budget, there are some things that are, I think, sacred to a lot of people, but they are new things. They are things that are not there today that would be there next year under this proposal. And I think we all said, let's go for it, because we could still do this with a low increase and all of it. On my end, those would be the first places that the town would have to look to go for. But I still think that at a minimum, we're still looking at the town running the way it is right now. And I think the town's running really well right now from what we had from a funding standpoint. Maybe it's not as desirable. There's lots of things that people want. But I have a difficult time, and I understand your points about the numbers. I personally have a very difficult time simply taking that and rolling it up into the mill rate and saying, hey, Hartford can't pay for it, so now we have to pay for it. Because that's exactly what's going on here. There was a decision, it was to hit wealthy towns that there was an assumption would simply roll it up in their mill rate and move on. And that they would say it's $73, it's not a big deal, because everyone can go and pay for it. But it doesn't, because it gets caked in the budget, it's $73 forever, and next year they come back and they're just going to keep stripping the stuff down while mandating things on the back end of it all. And I personally have a really difficult time with that. And I think that if I thought, my view, if I thought that things that were in the budget right now would absolutely have, currently, would have to get stripped out and there would be total damage everywhere because of it, I feel like my back was against the wall on this, but I really think that it's clear. We for all these meetings that we had, we saw things all across the budget that were being done because of savings in one place, because it was a lower, increase year as a whole. And we talked about this as, one town, not just, BOE or the town side siloed. And on my end, I think, that we need to go to those first. And if the mill rate doesn't go up, and I think that we'll be okay as a town. And I think we will be in a better position, quite frankly, as a town, to not simply pass it off to the next layer and just make that our practice.
Thank you, Mr. Becker.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, if I just correct that, because on the town side, we did not add things in across the board this year. We had some expenses go down, and we took those to the bottom line.
Okay.
Let's not get. There were some increases in paving, as an example. I mean, we're talking, again, things that are long-standing plans, things, I'm just saying that the number, it would simply be the same the following year. That's my.
Yeah, we don't need to.
I don't mean you
rehash
padded
it.
things, right? I mean, that's not what I'm,
Okay.
that's not what I'm saying.
Go to Mr. Walsh. Then we'll go to Mrs. Leclerc.
I have no idea what the legislature's going to do. Because I've never seen such insanity as I've seen this year up in Hartford. Started with the Appropriations Committee. They started it, trying to make up this $900,000. And our own representative...
$900 million.
$990 million. And our own representative, Kristen McCarthy-Vayu's on that.
Well, point of order, Mr.
For
Chair.
1.2 months.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. She voted for the Partnership 2.0 that saved this town $3.5 million this year. So if we're going to call people out, let's be a little careful about
Why don't we
that.
just wait?
And that wasn't supported by the other members of our state delegation. So I take offense, and it is a point of order. We should not be discussing individual votes in this, especially if we're going to make them partisan.
He's stating facts. Well, it's just, you would...
Not full disclosure, and then that's fine. When
You
he's
would-
done, I want to
Of
point out the
course.
other side of that.
Have I ever not let you? Have I ever not let you? Just let him finish, and you can absolutely, and in fact, I think you just did. And it,
I'll be happy to repeat it.
go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
Voted for a $1.2 million cut in the ECS funding that comes to this town. And then the governor increased it. The governor increases it to $3.5 million. And it's the most interesting calculation. I don't even know how it works, because we're trying to solve a state deficit of almost $1 billion. And I would have thought, they would have said, if you wanted to hit the ECS money and say we need some savings there of $54 million, wherever the number is, that you would have said, how are we going to save that amount of money in that bucket? Well, we'll figure out what that amount of money is as a percentage of the total amount. And everybody would take an equal hit based on how much you were getting the previous year. But unbeknownst to me, that's not how that works. Somehow there's some calculation where Fairfield goes from getting $3.5 million to getting zero, but cities like Bridgeport go and get an extra $25 million, or Hartford $30 million. They get more money in this process.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, again, I'm going to raise
I mean,
order on the same
it's-
thing. This is just, we're getting very, very far afield here. We're here to discuss what mill rate we're going to discuss, not what Hartford did or might do. I mean, I understand what you
But I
said before
think-
about facts, but they have to be relevant facts. What the procedure was in Hartford is just not what we need to discuss here. That's for
It
them.
is if we're going to entertain a motion to delay the vote based on what Hartford's doing. And none of us can figure out what Hartford's doing.
Well, I don't think we need the historical background.
Mr.
I mean,
Walsh,
that's
do you
just
want to wrap
going on
up?
very, very extensively.
I know you don't like the conversation, but it's just, it's a logical conversation about where we are. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, there's a proposal by the Republicans up there that would cut nothing from the town ECS money. Nothing. It wouldn't affect municipal aid at all.
Now, that's not correct.
It wouldn't affect ECS money, would it? Mike, you support that? Do you support the Republicans in that?
I don't believe that their proposal is balanced or could work, because they have assumptions in there on the revenue side and on cost-cutting side that they cannot deliver on a timely basis and have not been discussed with the workplace.
They weren't going to cut the ECS money. And I
If
think
you're
it's
if you're
crazy.
making
I think
numbers
it's-
up, you can
I
do
think
a
it's-
lot.
I think in balancing this
I think
budget,
they're all doing that.
to cut education
I would
money,
not argue very long with you on that.
I think to cut education money in balancing this budget is horrible, to be quite honest with you, especially with the amount of money that this town sends up to Hartford and the amount that we get back. I think it's horrible. But I don't know what they're going to do. And they've delayed their vote. It's supposed to be yesterday. They're obviously having problems. I have to go with the information that I have now, and that's what I'm prepared to go with.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mrs. Leclerc.
Mr. Flynn, I thought you were going to give me a chance to respond.
Oh, okay, I will.
All right.
I thought you already did, but go
No.
right ahead.
One, I think it's, as a point of order, I think to bring another elected official into this without them being here, if you want to know what they voted or how they voted or the background on it, and certainly looking at a vote, that doesn't look like. Second, it's difficult for me to believe with any credibility that Mr. Walsh is that upset at that when he personally has made motions before this board to cut millions of dollars off the Board of Ed budgets over time. Millions of dollars. More in some of his motions than any one motion being considered up in Hartford right now. So I think that...
More than
that's-
3.5 million?
I'd have to go back and add them up all in one session.
So
But I'd
over a
have-
number of years, not in one time.
No, in one budget session. I know they made more than that, but I have to go back and add them up to get an exact amount. But certainly over 2
Maybe you
million.
should do that before you say that.
Well, certainly over 2 million,
Okay.
Mr. Flynn. Certainly over 2 million.
No, I've never made one over 2 million, Mike. So you can apologize to me on the record at the next meeting.
You've made 2 million and other motions after that. You made a 2 million motion, and after
Yeah.
that failed a 1 million motion, so that's $3 million in total.
Wait, 2 million and then going down to 1 million?
Well, in motions.
And you add them
Oh,
together?
come on, Mike, seriously.
Yep.
Seriously.
And that's a direct cut to education.
It is a direct cut. And
In this case, if it-
the
in
only
this case-
difference is I'm talking about Fairfield dollars, and we're managing our budget.
Yeah.
When you're bringing in 6.4% tax increases.
I haven't ever brought in a 6.410,
Oh, you proposed one.
right?
You
Guys,
proposed a
and-
tax increase
at
of
this
All right,
6.4%.
and we knew, Jim, everybody knew that was out to bid, that was in Board of Ed healthcare, and you knew what that was. And
No, we
bringing that
did
up
not.
again is not credible.
Guys, we're done.
Mr. Flynn, I was still trying to respond.
You were yelling.
I was not yelling.
Yeah, you were.
If you want to hear me yell, I'll do that, but I was not yelling, and he was interrupting me, and I had the floor.
Go right ahead, Mr. Tetra.
Thank you. Thank you. Still think, as a point of order, we should not discuss other elected officials. If you have a question on why they voted on something at state level, we should bring them in to do that.
I don't think you questioned, I think you stated a fact.
In terms of, I'm not going to defend the state budget process up there this year, or frankly, any other year. I think they've got a lot of work up there to do. It's certainly nowhere near as transparent or bipartisan as the budget process we use here in Fairfield. And that, above all things, has been very disappointing to learn. The more I learn about it, the more I'm disappointed in that.
Should be. I think we all are. Mrs. Leclerc.
Okay. And I'm going to take what Mr. Tetro just said and lead into what I was about to say. And that is, I feel what's happening at the state has been quite arbitrary. They can't make a tough decision and live within their means. So they are, in fact, passing the tax down to us. And when we start our budget process, you lead us kindly through the budget book, and we know where your proposed mill rate is right from the start. And we're looking at that number, and as we hear each department and listen to each budget, we're thinking about how much we can increase taxes in one given year. And that is always in the Board of Finance's minds as we go through the budget process. And so when we approved the budget, we approved it trying to reach a specific goal and try to keep that mill rate within reason. And so because we don't know what the state is about to do and how much they're going to cut, and we know where we want to end up, I think we still have to approve the mill rate as we planned, and then we're going to have to make tough decisions as the year goes on, and Mr. Tetro is going to have to lead us through that. But I think we need to approve the mill rate as we planned.
If I might add on to that just briefly, what CCM is working on and what we're pushing for as part of the CCM group is that the state would decide the municipal aid package up front, even though they might work on the rest of the budget later, to kind of help with the timing on that.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I can't believe that hasn't been done years past. I'd like to run through a couple things here, if I might.
May I
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to
make a
need your
point
help.
before you do that?
You want to make a point? Okay, I want to go, but go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I mean, it sounded like you were putting us
Was it
to a
your name?
vote. I didn't want to go that
No,
far.
no.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'll wait for you then. Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I definitely wasn't. I let you know I was going to do that. Thanks. All right, can we turn to page Schedule E? Mr. Mayor, thank you. Once again, I want to thank you for putting together the package on the mill rate adjustment. I appreciate it. Being an accountant, I like to go to the numbers. So we start out at about 2.45, right? Which is the adjustment if all this stuff were to go wrong, right? If the 2.3 adjustment comes down from the state, if the motor vehicle adjustment, we get no offset, the assessment appeals, it's where it is, and senior citizen tax relief, right? Okay.
I'm sorry, start with.
Just go with me here. I'm on
Yeah,
a
but
roll.
I didn't hear the intro of what you said.
Okay. If all this stuff works out, we've got to, you estimate that the hit to the budget, if all this stuff were to go badly for us, the hit to the budget on the revenue side is about $2.45 million.
Yes,
Your number.
yes, sir, okay, I'm with you.
Okay. We know, and you stated yourself, that the motor vehicle adjustment is overstated here
Correct.
because it's a gross amount, not a net amount. And it's reasonable to assume that the net amount will be much, much less than that. Correct statement?
I hope so, and I think so.
All right. Let's say, and by the way, I agree. I don't know what the state's going to do. It's screwed up. I'm sorry, we don't know. It's been all over the law, quite frankly. If it was going to be the 2.3, or if we could guarantee it, they would have voted last night. They didn't. Okay, whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. All right? If I look at this 2.4, I think the number's closer to 2.1. Right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So you've already said that in the last 5-6 weeks since we've done this, we've already picked up about $200,000 in collection. Right? Net number. Collections versus what was offset. Right?
Yeah, the assessment appeal adjustment had a 200,000 negative, the collection rate changed 400,000 positive, for
Right.
net 200,000
Right.
positive.
And then you've got another 70 in here for lawsuits for assessment appeals, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if we say the cut coming off this page is a grand total of 2.1 million, right? Now, if we were to approve the mill rate that we thought we were going to approve 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, whatever that number is, right? That's an extra $200,000, correct? So then the adjustment is down to 1.9 million. Fair statement, Mr. Mayor?
I understand what you're doing, yes.
Okay. So then we're looking at a $1.9 million adjustment on a budget of, what is it, 290 some odd million, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Very small percentage on that basis. Now,
293 to be exact.
293. And we're looking at 1.9 million, right? Now, I heard us talking about estimates earlier. I've been doing budgets for 25 years, both in business and publicly like this. All budgets are based on estimates. We estimate the collection rate. We estimate the motor vehicles. We estimate insurance. We estimate OPEB. We estimate snowstorms. The entire budget is based on estimates, both the revenue and expense side. That's what a budget is by definition. Let's look at a few of the other estimates. So we're looking at a $1.9 million problem. On the insurance side, Mr. Mayor, I'm not saying we would take this all or that it's going to hold up. But if you were to add together the Board of Ed and the town side insurance experience, where we're going into next year, right now, what's that number that we're over?
Are you saying what is,
Based on the experience,
based upon what's funded?
you know the schedule we do all the time.
Yeah, right, the internal service fund schedule.
Correct.
Right.
Board of Ed is over about $1 million right now, right?
Board of Ed is over, the Board of Ed should give back to the town $1,050,000 if all goes as currently known.
And what's, right, big if, couple months left in the year. What's the town side?
The town side, I look at differently because the town side, I meld it all together and that's still a negative number, so I don't really measure that number. So I
But you
can't-
have it on you have it on the health insurance side.
Yeah, but I haven't.
All right, so you don't have it.
I don't-
I'm going to take that $1 million from the Board of Ed, right? And I'm going to say that number, I'm going to leave some cushion in there in case we have bad experience, okay? I'm going to leave the same cushion that I personally advocated be put in last month, just $250,000.
Correct.
So I'm going to say, you now got a $1.9 million cut, less $750,000. Fair?
1.15.
1.15 million. That's a $1.15 million cut on a $293 million budget, right?
0.3%.
Excuse me?
0.3% more or less.
0.3%. Now, I was at the same RTM meeting that Mr. Tetra was at when they voted on this. And he's absolutely right in that what they voted on in terms of appropriations. What he didn't say was the statements that were actually made when the RTM approved that budget. Mr. Hurley got up and spoke about approving that budget, but saying we expected any shortfall to be managed jointly between the town and the Board of Education.
That's a
Because
correct
we
statement.
do not want to raise taxes. We want it managed, and those expenses managed to come in with that.
I was there as well. That's a correct statement.
Right, so that's what he said. So the real intent, at least of, and he was speaking for the majority, was we're going to pass this budget because we think it was put together well. Nice job. We agree with the estimates. We agree that everything was done. We also know we got this problem in Hartford, and we expect this problem in Hartford to be managed through expense control, not through raising taxes. They were very clear on that before they voted, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now we're looking at a $1.15 million problem, if that's what this is, right? I had a conversation with Dr. Title today, which is, by the way, how I found out, the first time I found out that they couldn't be here tonight because of the other Board of Education meeting. And in that conversation, which was about this, and I didn't go into the 1 million at the point we were talking about 2.3 million. Let me be clear, because it's a number that could be a cut. And he said, and I want to be very clear, and I asked him if I could quote him tonight, and he said I could. He said, you know, I stand behind the budget. I think it's a strong budget. I think it's a right budget. He was very appreciative that the Board of Education supported his budget, that the Board of Selectmen worked on his budget, that the Board of Finance approved his budget, and that the RTM passed it. He also was very clear that he was very frustrated by what was going on at the state level. He could not understand and could not believe that they had cut the ECS, and he had never seen that before. He also said that he felt very badly for the taxpayers of Fairfield, and he understood that they had a problem with all these funds. And I said, you know, what is a cut? Let's take the $2.5 million. You're going to get a percentage of that. What that percentage is, who knows, but you're going to get a percentage of it. And he said, yes. He said, I think the town should get a percentage, and I think we'll take a percentage. And he goes, I want to be clear, you know, I'm not asking for a percentage, is what he said. You know, I would rather we don't do it. And he fully supports his budget. But he said, you know, Tom, if we have to take a cut here of some size below that, it's not going to affect program. We can find that money. We can find that money, is what he said. He said, I'm not going to be happy to find it. Will we have to do some different things? Yeah, we will. But we can find the money to not harm the program. The one caveat he said is, I would like, and this is him, I would like to work with my senior administrators to find that. I would like to prioritize where that is. You guys tell us what the number is, and we'll work with it. And he was very clear he would like his insurance number to be part of that number. He said, I think that would only be fair, because it was done in the past years, that we benefit from the insurance number and that be used as an offset to our cut. And that's what he said. I put that out there for full disclosure because, A, he said I could, and B, because I think that kind of tamps down some of the fear and things that we've been having around town related to that. The other items, right? Permits, conveyance, and investments. We were largely pretty conservative on those in this budget process for revenue side. So there might be offsets there, right? So at the end of the day, we're looking at $1 million. $1 million with this budget. I want to send a message to Hartford. The message I want to send to Hartford is we're not just going to take it and put it back in our budget. Because they're $1 billion off this year, they're scheduled to be $5 to $6 billion off next year.
I thought it was 2, but it's in the billions.
Yeah, I had heard 5 to 6. Okay, 2.
It'll probably be 8.
Yeah, it'll probably be 8. Mr. Brown's probably right. Whatever it is. We can't be held accountable for that. It's not fair to our taxpayers. It's not fair to anybody in town. That's why I wanted to step you guys through the math, because when I do that, it's palatable. Thank you for listening to my soliloquy for a few minutes. What else? Anybody else have any comments? Mr. Hopkins, please.
So, Mr. Flynn, as I understand your scenario, but that really only covers the portions of the cuts that would have to be undertaken by the Board of Ed. I mean, if you're going to have some of it by the Board of Ed and some of it by the town side. There's going to be more cuts on the town side, won't there?
Well, there's also revenue adjustments.
Well,
And by the way, Mr. Mayor, at the end of each of the last several fiscal years, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've run a surplus. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely.
And how much was the surplus last year?
3 million,
3 million? Now, in fairness, some of that surplus last year,
wait a second. Was it 1.2?
it was like 3.2.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but Linda
Yeah,
was saying.
but in fairness, all right, and to answer the question, a large chunk of that was the FEMA reimbursement. Right? If you backed out the FEMA reimbursement, it's closer to like $1 million. Yeah.
well, but what if some of that doesn't come true, and we end up making cuts? Next year, we're looking at a scenario where we're going to have a lot more serious challenges. And things that get cut this year, it's going to be much, much tougher to put them back in. You know, I'm looking at trucks in the DPW, which we wanted to try to keep on the regular budget. And now next year, when we have much more serious challenges, if they get cut this year, it's going to be much harder to put them back in next year and get that going. One of the reasons why we did that this year is because we had the opportunity. I think we need to keep going with that opportunity. It is precisely because we don't know what the state government is going to do that I think it's irresponsible to go forward this evening and set a tax mill rate based upon revenues that we expected that we were going to get when we set the original budget. That, in fact, is just setting ourselves up for a serious failure. I'd like to ask a question of the town attorney, and I'd like to ask the town attorney if he knows, is he here? Oh, there he is.
He is.
While he's getting set up, the question is, well, first of all, isn't it true that we have an obligation to fund the budget as it was appropriated by the RTM?
Under state statute,
Okay.
the Board of Finance has an obligation to lay a tax that is sufficient to cover the current expenses. Those expenses are the appropriations that were passed by the RTM on Monday. So under state law, you have an obligation to fully fund those appropriations.
Is there any, but our problem is we don't know what funding we're going to get from the state, which means we have to set a mill rate, presuming what it is. Is there any precedent on that subject if we don't set it appropriately or if we're wildly off?
Well, I think that you have a deficit budget, which is not a proper budget. I think that certainly under the law, you can wait to determine to get all the information that you want. There are, I think, some avenues that the town can take if you do have a deficit budget that's funded. But again, very simply, you have to set the mill rate to fully fund the budget based on all the income, non-tax income that you're going to get. Very simple, section 7-344.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an obligation to set the mill rate based on real figures. I would strongly urge this body to wait. There's a very, very strong possibility the legislature may act as early as next week. Waiting 1 week or even 2 would not be a disaster for this body. To do otherwise would essentially be to inflict a cut on the spending that we approved just about a month ago, that the RTM approved just last night unanimously. Because
Monday night.
correct. And if we pass the budget, if we pass a mill rate that presumes money that we don't get, when that money doesn't come in, we're going to end up having to cut programs seriously. That money will be taken up by education. We have an opportunity this year to, I think one of the things that the Board of Ed was doing was they were trying to reconfigure their math program, so they had new math textbooks they wanted to buy. That might be off the table. I know that they wanted to try to extend foreign languages to children in the 3rd grade, which would be extremely smart thing to do because that's when children are better able to learn languages. These are just great opportunities and things that we had a great opportunity to do. And I know when we first found out some of the great things that were happening with the budget, everybody wanted to have a 0% tax increase this year. And it's not our fault, but we just have to fund this budget as is. And I would strongly urge us to wait until maybe next week or a week or two so that we can do this appropriately, legally, fund it appropriately, and not get ourselves in any trouble and not get ourselves off budget. We've had a lot of years of planning, trying to get a lot of things on budget, and now if we do this, there's a very good chance things will get cut and we won't have things on budget so that we can keep our budget in a straight path. So,
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Others? Mrs. Leclerc?
Well, if we knew that the state was going to cut funding a month ago when we passed the budget, I would not have voted for the budget as it was passed. I would have cut the budget more. And I believe many of us would have considered that because there's a limit on how much we can increase the tax rate. So I don't see any difference on passing it tonight or passing it next week. I would still set it at the same amount. I would not increase the mill rate.
Thank you, Mrs. Leclerc. Anyone else? Mr. Mottola?
I guess I get back to my original comment where I have a concern that we're not following the law. And I understand, based on your comments, Mr. Flynn, that over any given year, different things can happen during the course of a budget over a fiscal year, and you could have shortfalls and so on and so forth. But the difference is, we have the ability in the next week or two to know what we're going to be getting from the state of Connecticut. That's the big difference from a scenario where, we pass a budget and then something bad happens during the fiscal year and we have to juggle. So that's the concern I have. And if it's appropriate right now, we'd like to make a motion to postpone.
It's certainly appropriate.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion to postpone voting on item number 1, to consider and set the mill rate for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2016, and ending June 30th, 2017. I make a motion to postpone that till our next meeting, which is May 17th. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor?
That was the date, yes.
Okay, so...
I'm not Mr. Mayor, but that was the date. I heard it.
Is that the date?
That was the date.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I directed it to you. But,
No problem.
so I'd like to make that motion. I just made it.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Do we have a second? Mr. Hopkins seconds that motion. The motion is now before us. Any discussion, comments, concerns about that motion? No comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote. All in favor of delaying the vote on the mill rate setting to date certain, our quarterly meeting on May 17th, raise your hands. 2. All opposed? 5. The motion fails. So the mill rate item is back before us. At this point, any other questions, comments, concerns? Do we have any motions?
I have a motion, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to set the mill rate at 0.02545.
Did he say that correctly, Mr. Mayor? Do we have a second to that motion? We have a second by Mr. Brown on this motion. That item is now before us? Yes,
That's the original one.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns on this motion?
I have a
Mr.
question.
Hopkins,
I have a question.
please.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor, and this refers to your presentation earlier. What would the mill rate be if we presumed that we were getting 2.3 million, that our deficit was going from the state funding was going to be 2.1 million, which I think was the figure you were using?
The 2.3 million, you mean, or the 2.1 that I calculated?
I don't know, ask Mr. Mayor what he was presuming.
He used the 2.3, and if you go to page Schedule G,
Okay.
he's factored that in there, correct, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
That's the 25.64 you referred referred to earlier.
So we're at 2564. If we go all the way, if we go the halfway which would be your number, Mr. Flynn, that would be 2553.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thanks for that additional information.
And I'm sorry, the number proposed by Mr. Walsh was?
2544.
All right.
45, excuse me.
2545.
45.
25.45.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to make a motion to amend Mr. Walsh's motion to adjust the mill rate to 2564.
Do I have a second for your motion? Mr. Mottola, the motion is before us as amended. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns on this? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment to the motion to raise the mill rate to 2564, correct? I said that correctly? Okay, all in favor of setting the mill rate at 2564? 2. All opposed? 5. The amendment fails, and the item back before us is to set the mill rate at 2545. Questions, comments, concerns on the item before us? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote, and this is to set the mill rate for the fiscal year 2017 for the town of Fairfield at 2545. All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries 5-2. The mill rate for the next fiscal year has been set. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess. We've been going for quite some time, and we'll come back in just 5 minutes and finish up the rest of the agenda items. Thank you very much. I'm going to call the meeting back into order. And item number 4 is to hear, consider, and approve the appointment of the auditors for fiscal year 2016. Mr. Mayor, you want to walk us through this one, please?
Our Cohen Resnick, our auditors, Joseph Centofanti is the partner. We're required every year to, by the end of May, to notify the state as to who we are selecting to audit, to be the designated auditor for the town for the following fiscal year. And Ms. Bossy and I work well. We're happy and appreciative of Cohen Resnick, and we're recommending that the board appoint them for our auditor for fiscal year 2017.
At this point, I'm just going to briefly ask Mrs. Leclerc, who's the chairperson of our audit committee, if she has any thoughts on this item or any things she'd like to share with us.
We really haven't discussed anything changing. Usually it takes some time if you want it to change, so at this late date, I think we really have to keep the same auditor. And I think we've been fairly happy with them, so I approve it. I just have one question for Mr. Mayor, and that is the amount, and did they give us an engagement letter yet, and is it the same amount that we put in the budget?
No, the amount that's in the budget is actually a little bit less than last year as a result of negotiations, but I do not have a formal engagement letter yet.
Okay.
But the amount's been agreed upon, the
Okay.
reduced amount.
Mr. Walsh, you had a question?
And I had the same question. So will you have a verbal agreement with Mr. Centofanti on the amount? Great.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns from this board on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to ask you to put it before us, Mr. Brown, for a vote. Do I have a second? Mr. Walsh. Okay, all in favor of appointing Cohen Resnick for the next budget, for the next audit? Those opposed, abstentions, that item carries. Thank you. Item number 5.
And thank you all.
Thank you. And please tell Mr. Centofanti, as I know you will. Item number 5, to hear, consider, and approve the transfer of funds from IT contingency to IT capital outlay for purchases in the amount of $90,000. Mr. Mayor, you want to walk us through this, please?
Yes, Mr. Signataglia will walk through the
Thank you.
specifics on it. One correction in the agenda, and it's my error. It has to come from the town's contingency account, not the IT. It was actually moved into the regular contingency account this year, $134,000.
Thank you for the change. You're up.
Hello, how is everyone?
Dan?
Basically, we're looking for the funding that was removed from last year's budget process and put into the contingency fund to basically fund the programs, basically the replacement schedule that we had going into the year. The capital outlay was cut approximately in half, a little bit more actually was taken out of the from the actual capital outlay and put into contingency. I've put together a schedule which shows the purchases that we'll be making with it's $90,000 roughly is the number. I do actually have a latest best effort to the schedule that was just sent out, the backup. One of the quotes changed, very minor, went from about 15,000 up to about 16,000. That should easily still be absorbed into that number of 90,000.
Are there questions, comments on the schedule that was provided, or any thoughts on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to call this for a vote. Mr. Brown, Mr. Walsh. Thank you. All right, actually, I'll take Mr. Hopkins on this one. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. So the item before us is to hear, consider, and approve the transfer of funds from the town's contingency account to IT capital outlay for purchases in the amount of $90,000. To approve this, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for all your hard work pitching in during the budget process and for working with us as well on the replacement of the laptops and doing that virtually. It was good work, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Item number 6, this is to consider and approve the minutes of meetings dating from February 3rd all the way through March 31st, which really was the entirety of the budget process. We can take these individually. First of all, let me put this before us. Can I have a motion to put all these before us? Mr. Brown, seconded by Mr. Mottola. We can take these individually, so that people that weren't there for individual nights are not approving minutes for nights that they weren't there, if that is good for everybody. In general, did anybody have any problems with the minutes as they were drafted? Any comments or concerns on the minutes? I just want to get it out on the table. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call these in order, and let's just roll through them. To approve the minutes of February 3rd, all in favor? Any opposed? None. February 16th, in favor?
You said February 3rd, it's February 2nd.
Oh, sorry, February 2nd. Thank you. February 16th, it's wrong on the agenda. February 16th, in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're looking for the abstentions, I believe. March 1st, the minutes of March 1st, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? March 3rd, all in favor? Opposed? Or abstentions? Mr. Mottola, are you abstaining? You're in favor, okay.
I'm abstaining from March 3rd.
Okay, and that's for both of those, the special and the combined. March 8th, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? March 10th, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Mottola, are you? Okay, I'm mucking up the works here, pal. Okay, March 15th, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? March 16th, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? March 19th, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention, Mr. Brown.
Oh, wait, the 19th, I wanted to abstain.
Okay, so two
Sorry.
on the 19th, we have two abstentions. Yes. March 21st, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions, Mr. Brown? And March 31st, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That works. So we are done with item number 6. Deb, did you get all that? Thank you. Item number 7 is to hear, consider, and act upon any other communications. Mr. Mayor, do we have any? I don't know of any off the top of my head.
I know of nothing, sir.
Okay. My apologies, guys, on the Fairfield Ludlow High School Building Committee. Certainly if I had known that we had a conflict with, before or earlier today with Dr. Title and the Board of Education, that wouldn't have been on the agenda. I did put them off from the April meeting, and they were very accommodating to that, and I thank them to that. I thought in the fog of the budget process, that wasn't going to be a good outcome. I thought it would just get convoluted and messed up in the budget process. So I was happy that they worked with Mr. Mayor and I to accommodate our request that we put that off. I also want to thank everybody. This has been a very contentious several weeks at the state level, and it's been very nerve-wracking at the town level. And not to pat ourselves on the back, that's not what I'm trying to do, but we were put as a town in a very difficult position with no right or wrong answers, just where our fate wasn't our own and where somebody else was making decisions regardless of what it meant to our community. And we all come at it from different ways and what we think is best. But at the end of the day, I know that all of us around this table specifically, and I would include others at the other town bodies, are just trying to do what we think is right for the town. And I think it's exactly by not doing that and not looking long-term, that's what we've done wrong by the state. So I thank everybody for their comments, their thoughts, and their goodwill as we've gone through this process. Does anybody have any other comments they'd like to make? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Go with Mr. Becker on this, go with Mr. Hopkins. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions? Good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.